I mean, you can honestly kind of bullshit your way to six figures, a couple $100,000 a year, or even like honestly $1 million a year, right? Like we did $1 million a year the past couple of years in our top line revenue and didn't have any of this stuff, right? But that's also why it felt like it was insanely hectic at all times. What's going on, guys? Welcome to this episode of the Collecting Keys podcast. Today it is Wednesday. It is the Mike and Dan show where I, Mike DeHaan, and my co-host here, Dan Austin, talk about real estate, investing, business, and everything in between. And we have just been high on, I don't want to say like church camp syndrome because there's like religious people that listen to this and that might be offensive, but we got back from a business mastermind.
We're buzzing. Is that offensive to say?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. Are there people that are alcoholics that listen to this and that triggers them? I have no idea.
Maybe.
Probably.
Yeah, I would say we're buzzing.
I'm triggered. I'm opening up a White Claw right now.
Good idea.
We are back from a business mastermind that we went to down in Scottsdale last week with our business coach. And it's the first mastermind that we've been to that is like not real estate. You know, we've been involved.
Real estate specific.
Yeah, like real estate specific. We've been involved.
I don't think real estate came up once.
Yeah, I mean, not outside unless it was like our core business or we had some friends that are also working with a business coach. About it. Yeah. But I mean, we're pretty involved nationally in like the real estate investment space, involved in a lot of groups, go to a lot of conferences. And it was cool to go to a small meetup like this that was literally focused on business and systems and scaling and that sort of stuff. And it just gives you like a whole different perspective, right? You realize, well, I guess I realized very quickly how poor most people operate their real estate businesses when we're talking about the systems. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure almost no one that we know does any of this.
Definitely not in the off-market space, and then anything above that, even like guys that are running syndications and stuff like that. You realize how actually a lot of businesses in real estate that are even loosely associated. I would say like good property management businesses have to have systems, but the bad ones, now I know why they're bad, because they have no systems.
Yeah, I mean, and that's
they don't know how to operate. They don't know how to run a business at all, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that it's easy to discount is when you start a business, you start making money. I mean, you can honestly kind of bullshit your way to six figures, a couple $100,000 a year, or even like honestly $1 million a year, right? Like we did $1 million a year the past couple of years in our top line revenue and didn't have any of this stuff, right? But that's also why it felt like it was insanely hectic at all times, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden we come back. I mean, we've been working with Steve Rozenberg, who was from, what episode was he on? Let me look it up here. He was on the show a couple weeks ago, episode 95, if you want to go check him out. But
definitely
we started
work.
Yeah, you definitely should. Awesome episode. It's actually our second most listened to episode. So he's had an impact on a lot of people. But we started working at the beginning of the year, started building these systems, and the crazy thing is our revenue's looking similar to past years, but it doesn't feel like the house is burning down literally all the time like it has in the past.
Yeah, it's grown at a good steady rate, and it's like just comfortable, consistent. We don't have to worry about what's in the bank account because we just have this like system that's churning and putting money in the bank account and paying our employees, and we're growing and finding new markets and all that, and it just like happens. Exactly. Not without a lot of hard work, but it's not going crazy. Like if you ever meet a person that's running a wholesale business and maybe flipping some houses too, and that person might be you, they're usually like always crazy, like running around. Like, oh, I've got to run over here. Oh, I've got to do this. I've got to go to Home Depot. I have to drop this off at the project. And it's just like this constant churn of just shit. That's not fun. Yeah.
I mean, and it's kind of the nature of the style of real estate that we do, right? Which off market, where most people started by themselves, you know, they're doing all the marketing, they're doing all the sales, doing all that sort of stuff. And then when you start to bring on staff, when it's all been in your head, everyone always does it rather quickly, which makes sense. We did the same thing. And so nothing's actually written out. The entire business is in their brain, right? And then as you grow, you try to do more stuff. It just turns into a big ball of spaghetti that you can never untangle. But the thing that's been cool has been working through it. And the stuff that we're working on is just basic standard operating procedures, having some form of like sales training, knowing how to do the handoff between like acquisitions and disposition or your transaction coordination team, stuff like that. And even if it's like 2 people, it's still important to have these things and build these habits.
Or just you. It could just be you. You still need to have those mental handoffs from system to system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just getting a structure about how to organize all of it, what it should look like, how to measure it. And lo and behold, we have a business that feels way less hectic. It's doing business in a bunch of different markets. And I mean, I don't feel super busy. I don't even leave my house for 6 days out of the week most of the time. Unless I feel like it. Like, definitely not for work. If I do, it's all because it's voluntary, not because I need to run around doing a bunch of stuff.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a lot. It's definitely a lot smoother. And on top of that, what you're saying, like when we were doing our business, like beforehand, like we were still learning our business. We were learning how to flip properties, how to wholesale properties, how to stabilize properties. So totally out there for the listeners, like we can empathize with that. But there is a better way. Once you start building those systems, even while you're learning and just kind of feel like you're on the treadmill, you still need to learn how to monetize your business. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you can, just put in even the smallest systems, and that'll give you some of your time freedom back.
Absolutely. And also, too, just on the note of working with Steve, this is actually a really good question that somebody asked me yesterday, where they're asking how we choose different like coaching programs or masterminds and things to be a part of, and like what sort of stuff we look for since there's so many of them out there. And I thought about that for a little bit, and I'm like, so my response was, if you want to be a serious entrepreneur, I highly recommend that you find a group that supports your broader circle as like an entrepreneur, right? People that are in different industries, people that are doing all sorts of stuff, right? Sort of similar maybe mindset, but gives you some diversity, right? So like that's for us, that's scope abundance. And then I said to him, you should also find a group to join that is specific to what exactly you're trying to do and has people that are very specific to your industry or what exactly you're trying to scale and all that sort of stuff, and join that too. And sure, it'll have a cost to it associated, but then you also have a network that is very, very relevant to your business. And for us right now, that's working with Steve, right? Like we could join another real estate group. As like why, like honestly, right. At this point, we join most real estate groups. I mean, this is honestly why we built our own real estate group with the Instant Investor program, is we would join other real estate groups and we would kind of be the most advanced people most of the time. But instead, joining a business specific coach who has his own group that is like very much on business systems and scaling, that is now our focus. It's no longer just real estate, it is business and the intricacies around that. And so that's sort of where we're splitting our time.
Yeah, I would add just a couple notes to, like, one of them is there should be a cultural fit for where you're at as well. Definitely. Like if you're looking at, say, a group coaching program or a mastermind that's led by a certain person, like I would say Steve is a one-on-one coach, but he has this broader group of people that he coaches that he brings together as kind of like your collective mastermind, and it's a small, intimate setting. Steve is very much so in alignment with what we need for our business. And he draws a really diverse group, which is one of the diverse groups that I always talk about that, like just so broad of different people from different backgrounds and walks of life. That fits us really well. But if you're looking at somewhere where the person that's leading is just like a hustler, that's probably the kind of people they're going to bring in. And you're going to see a lot of hustle entrepreneurs, hustle mindset going in there. If that's not where you're at in life, that might not be the group that you want to be part of. You might be below that or above that as far as what you want to do in business. And so think about that and try to, if it is a group, see if you can attend or be part of a group session or a group meeting or something, so you can just kind of see who's around and see the engagement. Because that's the other thing is, like, if the person leading it is the only one talking and there's just not a lot of engagement from the group, it's probably it's not always going to be a best fit unless you're looking for a technical skill that person's going to teach you.
Yeah. I mean, and even then, what a lot of those people that become like professional educators and professional influencers do is they might have the skill, but then they have like the coaches that they've taught how to do it that like were realistically other students from the past, and it just might not be the experience you're looking for. That's like a super common situation that you're seeing right now with these different groups. But either way, though, I think if you find someone to be your like your broad network and then your specific network. That's how I suggest people look at different masterminds and make sure it's a cultural fit as well. So like for Steve with us, he's very much action oriented, systems oriented. That's what we want. Some people are really into like the mindset of business and they want coaching that revolves around that. There's a ton of people that do that.
There's a ton.
So
that one's a little stickier, trickier because a lot of voodoo stuff out there that you can find, and people that sell you whatever, but they're actually not very good at it.
The people eat that shit up though, dude. Like in my mind, that's like the equivalent, and then we're gonna start talking trash, of course. In my mind, that's the equivalent of like the business professor at like a university that's never owned a business before. Like they're gonna talk, they're gonna be like a CEO mindset coach, but they've never actually been a CEO. So I'm like,
yeah, there's a lot of leader coaches out there and people like that that have never actually led or done anything, and so then you're paying them to teach you how to do it.
Yeah,
I don't think
doesn't make any sense. So.
But in that realm, there's a lot of those you have to weed through, where you find in the coaching of like actual business, scaling businesses, or actually a specific topic, whether that's like, I want to learn how to do off market, so I'm going to join an off market group. Like that's a little easier to weed through the trash because there's just not as many people, and it's usually quite obvious, at least from our perspective, who those folks are that suck.
Yeah, usually, but sometimes it's hard if you don't know what exactly to watch out for.
This is true.
So, I mean, you always got to do your due diligence on just like people in general, especially if they're people of influence. I mean, like, for example, when you start to make money, okay, and everyone that's listening to this show has listened to any of our material in the past, if you kind of follow along, you do the stuff that we talk about, maybe you join the Instant Investor Program and join a different group and you start to take action, you will eventually become wealthy. Like I can guarantee you that. It is literally consistency over time. It is not challenging. When you start to have wealth, you start to make money, you will get approached by people that, want your money, right? They want to provide you wealth management. They want to sell you insurance. They want to do that other sort of stuff. People, like there's tons and tons of marketing and all these things that people do to make themselves sound legitimate with that. And this ties into the coaches as well because they do the same sort of thing. But it is so important that whenever anybody reaches out to you and they ask for any sort of large sum of money or a large financial relationship, that you do your due diligence on those people. Okay. And the reason I'm going into this is I had someone recently who's a pretty decent personality that he's on a podcast that is very well listened to by a lot of people. I've been on this show before. I'm not going to like put the actual podcast on blast because I like the host. I just don't like the co-host after the situation. But he is a wealth advisor, like a wealth planner. And I started talking to them from listening to their show, trying to figure out what to do with my money. And first off, when the first thing someone says is like, oh, I'm a fiduciary, this is why you should listen to me, I'm going to start to say that's like a red flag. That's like the same as like when you meet a contractor and they say like, I'm an honest guy. I always want to just do right by people.
I tell the truth all the time.
I tell the truth all the time.
Or it's kind of like if you were on a podcast and you said, I'm the only ethical wholesaler out there. It's kind of similar to that. It should be a red flag to anybody.
Yeah, it is. It should be a red flag for sure. But when somebody comes on and they say like, I'm a fiduciary, this is why you should listen to me. And then they proceed to try and like sell you something. And then they proceed to follow it up with hard sales tactics about like getting you to close. That person's no longer a fiduciary, right? They are literally trying to get you to do things to, take your money. So, but literally there was this guy, went through this whole process with him. I was down to start working with him. And then my grandma died like in the middle of the whole process of getting it set up. And so I was like, hey, look, I think I put this on hold. I need to figure it out. And like literally while I'm going through this process of my grandma's funeral, all those sort of things, he's like hitting me up, trying to see what's going on. We're ready to move forward. I'm like, okay, I got red flags now. So I started talking to my wider circle just about the stuff that me and him had discussed for wealth planning, and ultimately decided that I was not ready to make that commitment. And then, he was hitting me up like weird hours, doing all these sort of things. I was kind of ignoring him. Finally, he texts me yesterday and we have this exchange, and he pretty much just tells me that I suck. And he's like that I'm stupid for talking to other people to get other opinions. And the text ended up with, this is just showing how immature you are. Good luck. You're going to need it. And I was like, wow, what a dick bag. And this is someone that literally is trying to establish a lifelong relationship, right, on a very large financial scale, and isn't willing to, I don't know, acknowledge that I had like a family death and had some other stuff that I was working on, and that of course I'm going to ask other people's opinions. I'm like, come on, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're doing your proper due diligence, which is what everybody should do. It's kind of interesting because we're loosely in the same circles, so you'd think if he's going to be a jerk, he would not be a jerk to somebody in the same circles.
I know. Like you think
but
so.
But apparently he is, so you think about that. What else is he doing out there that is, for his own satisfaction, that doesn't help anybody or anything?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, literally most of the same circles, because the people that he pitches to for his business are also in GoBundance. Like, I know everyone that he goes after on a regular basis.
I know.
It's like, what are you doing, bro? I don't get it. So anyway, but point being, coaches, business coaches, all sorts of things, anyone that asks for any sort of significant sum of money, and this comes with us too. If you apply to be in the Instant Investor Program, get on a call with me, absolutely do your due diligence on me. I will, but thing is, I'm not a scumbag. So there's a red flag. I just said that, right? I spat on my own face.
I'll say this. What you're not going to do is you're not going to give somebody, you're not going to like call somebody out for not joining your program. It's like, Correct. It's okay if it's not a right fit. And if it's not a right fit for right now, like, and honestly, when we bring clients on, we're likely to tell them they're not a right fit before we take their money. If they're truly not a right fit, because that's the last thing you and I do. We're not trying to just monetize the shit out of people for our short-term benefit, which some people are willing to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's a huge difference. And it's just that long-term mindset and establishing those actual relationships, because that's where success comes from. And also too, like, when you're meeting with people, I mean, getting testimonials is such an easy thing to do. And if people like aren't willing to give you testimonials, or they don't have someone in their group that is happy to tell you about their experience, I mean, because that's the other thing is some people are like, oh, it's like private. We don't give out information stuff, which I've literally heard from coaches before. That's a major red flag. And the funny thing is like, even in our group, there's people that are more than happy to give another person time just because they're so stoked on having worked with us. And we've done the same thing for other people too. That's why we talk about like GoBundance and other coaches and stuff we've had on here, because they provided enough value that we're happy to share that.
So let's get back on this mastermind that we were buzzing from now that we went on that tirade. Like, talk about some of the cool shit that we learned. I had a blast. I don't know about you, but it was a good time. I don't know if I should ask you the number one thing, but like, what is one thing maybe that you would take away that you think is like super applicable?
I
have a bunch. I have like pages of notes, but so it's a hard question.
Like I literally have pages of notes as well. So one of the primary things that I took away from it was how easy it is to get caught up and think that your business is like super unique and challenging, but a lot of the stuff you need to do is fundamentally the same. So like at this, everyone there kind of had different businesses. Steve's business that he scaled and sold was a property management business. We had people that spoke that were from different kinds of businesses, and it made me realize how much of a skill like business itself is. Like, once you get into the nuts and bolts of it. And that's also why I think that you can have these people that like learn how to run one business and then they can build and scale other ones that seem like completely different. It'll be like, oh, I didn't know that freaking Rob Dyrdek was more than like a skateboarder. It's like, well, he learned how to do business, and once he made his 9 figures on one, it's very easy to go and do it to another because the process is exactly the same.
Absolutely. It's like pattern recognition. Once you figure out that process and that system, it's just recognizing the patterns in your next venture, your next business, and saying, okay, here's the problems I need to solve. And once you solve those problems, that's your unique skill set. The product is the product, whatever that is. But once you figure out how to scale that business model, you can go out and you can kind of do that really anywhere.
You can, yeah. And that's what you see with a lot of the big business influencers out there, right? Like Cody Sanchez talking about the small businesses and everything applied to that. Like, I really do believe that she can buy any business and make it successful because she knows the fundamentals about how to run a business.
Yep.
You know, I don't necessarily think that what she coaches is for everybody, because you have these people that are like, well, I'm a W-2 employee making $50,000 a year, and I'm going to buy a, you know, paper binding company on seller financing and pretend like I know how to be a fucking CEO.
No, but I will say that here's the plug for folks that are in real estate and doing what we're doing. I think you're better off going, like, I think you start out at a higher level if you were to go into Cody Sanchez's program, because you're essentially taking, and often we have to get creative with our deals, creative with our financing. We have to reposition a property. That's what you're doing in these small businesses, right? And I think the thing with small businesses is rarely do small businesses fail because they're not profitable. They fail for a couple reasons, but the point I'm making here, they fail because the owner wants too much of the profits. Right. And
Absolutely.
so if you had a business, for example, that was producing $1,000, right? So let's think of a rental property as a business producing $1,000 a month in cash flow. That's probably not enough for you to live off of. Yeah. But you can set that rental property up such that it can run somewhat passively. And what Cody is pitching is you have to be able to set up these businesses. Unless you know that industry like clockwork, you have to be able to set up that business into a place where it can run with an operator in place. And who cares if you only make $1,000, because it's passive. That's the idea anyways. And that's why I think real estate investors have a leg up against the random W-2 employee who you're saying is like, yeah, I'm just going to go buy a business, a boring business because Cody Sanchez says to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. Right. And I think that happens in real estate because most people start it as kind of like a side hustle. And then when they jump into it, they've always treated it as a side hustle. So then they bring that mentality into when they start doing it full time. But
back to this point about scale though, and it's just chronologically in order in my notebook why I want to bring this up, and I think it was also a zinger for me to come right out the gate, because Steve always comes out the gate with just fire. But he talked about monetization, like the 3 parts of a business, the first being monetization. And most people know how to monetize, whether you're monetizing now or not. Like you have something you can monetize, whether that's walking dogs, whether that's running a full-time off-market real estate business, whatever. That's actually kind of the easier part, right? Making a little bit of money, doing something with your time.
Of course.
But the second part of the business is systematization. So systematizing your business and building those systems and processes so that your business can operate at a high level without you being involved in it, which gets you to the third part, which is scale. And I guess what I'm saying here is that most people probably never get to scale because they don't get the systematization. They monetize, they make money, but they never make it at scale because they miss the second part of the business, which is systematization. And to scale, that means you're able to monetize without you being in the business.
Yeah. I mean, and it's hard to comprehend that. And I think too, a problem is when you start doing like the work yourself, your income can increase a lot very, very quickly. And realistically, for you to start scaling and offering some of that work to employees, you are going to have to take a pay cut over the short term. And I think that most people, once they've tasted a little bit of revenue, right, they're starting to make more than they ever made before. It's really hard for them to do that. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's okay, right? Like, honestly, what we kind of did is we hustled for a few years.
Yeah.
We put some money in our bank account. So now as we are scaling, we're bringing on staff, we're bringing on employees that have like legitimate salaries. We're not paying people $15 an hour in our business. We have people that are making, $70,000, $80,000 a year. Right.
Yep.
That like we have taken pay cuts in order to do that because we have the long-term vision, but we're able to do that because we kind of already made a good chunk of money over the last couple of years by hustling, by flipping houses, by, beating the pavement ourselves. And, we've earned the ability to do that. So
for sure. I mean, obviously in hindsight, I wish we would have gotten to where we're at sooner.
Absolutely.
Right. You know what I mean? And hustled and we're grinding, to get to this point sooner, but it is what it is, and I think everybody has to learn at their own speed. And I feel like we're still learning faster than a lot, but slower than others, and it's just part of the business.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and it's a mindset shift. It takes practice. You will mess things up, and just like when you're buying your first rental property, you can't expect it to be perfect.
Yep.
Like you will jump into it, you will make mistakes, you will need to like redo stuff, and that's just sort of comes with the territory. Like all of a sudden, looking back at like my time in the corporate world, why you would have things over like quarterly and annual sort of like sprints, it makes sense because because you can't do stuff that much faster. Like it just takes a while
and
to
like
get
if you're
things done.
trying to focus on everything, and that is a challenge, and that's where some people figured out, a lot of really successful people figure out how to break things down really simply. And what you're saying is what we're finding in our business is that we have so many things to do that we need to break it down. Okay, here's all the things on our list, but this month we're going to do really good at this one thing. And this is going to be our sprint. And that's how you evolve your client. That's how you evolve your client satisfaction. That's how you evolve your sales success or whatever part of your business you're working on. And you really have to focus in on that. Otherwise, you're on the hamster wheel getting only part things done the whole time. Like you and I did that for a couple of years where we just would get halfway done on something. And that's all we did because we were on to the next thing because we were putting out fires in between.
Yeah. And I think a big build off of what you just there is it's really important to look at what you're doing and the results of what's happening and being honest about if it's actually effective or not. Because what happens with a lot of people is they spend 3 months, 6 months, a year on something and they think that they just keep, beating it to death, that it's eventually going to come together. But sometimes that's not the case, and you need to be honest with it. I mean, we actually see this a lot with some of the people that inquire that want to be part of our partnership program, where we like literally partner with them in a market, and they'll say things like, "Oh, well, I've spent the last like 2 years going and scraping all this data, driving for dollars, doing all these sort of things. Is like I only want to start with this system." And it's like, well, how many deals have you been getting from that? Obviously not enough that you want to do this yourself. So you're calling us like, let's try something new first and see how that goes. Let's try our system that we know works first and then see how that goes. And then we can mix in the stuff that you were doing before if needed. And then more often than not, our system that we've sort of like built and optimized over the last few years that we're very proficient in, it's proven more effective. Yep. And it's like, you just kind of need to reinvent the wheel a little bit, and that's okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's taken like a little new point of view sometimes, and people get the sunk cost bias that maybe you had some cost associated with building that list, whether that's time cost or dollar cost. And sometimes it's just like you and I have had to pivot. Sometimes even with properties and flips, you realize I'm not going to make money, and I just need to recapture as much of my capital back as possible and stop worrying about how much I'm going to make on this because that's a sunk cost. Let's just give up that 20 grand and come back and pivot back to where we know we can make money again.
Yeah. I mean, that alone on flips is really, really important. I think is a big trap that that people fall into. So I remember my very first house flip, actually, very first flip that I lost on, is one that I flipped by myself up on the South Hill here. And the first renovation I did on it was carpet and paint, pretty basic. The kitchen and stuff hadn't been redone. And I went and listed it on the market. I was having trouble selling it, but I got a couple offers, and I was, I'd worked on this thing for several months, and I was like, I was only going to make like $5,000. And I was like, this is horseshit. I put this much work into it. I'm only going to make five grand. So instead I went back to my hard money lender. I got some more money for renovation. And I went and I did the kitchen, I did all the bathrooms, I did all these other things, right? So it was like a brand new house, okay? Move forward, it took an extra like 4 months, a bunch of other stuff started going wrong, started cutting into walls, you find more problems, 100-year-old house. Lo and behold, we find this huge electrical problem that cost me $20,000 to fix, which I wouldn't have had to deal with before.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I go and I sell the property, and instead of making $5,000, I now lose 25.
I didn't realize you had put that one on the market before and then took it off. You idiot.
I do, but I had like that sort of like
it's a sunk cost bias, you had this sunk cost bias. Hey, I have all this money in here, I need to make it back. That is hard, and that's hard for anybody to realize. Like that money should be lost, and you don't always know what the future looks like. Like you didn't know you're going to run into electrical issues, you didn't know what the future market was going to be, and sometimes it goes in your benefit. But man, to stay around this business a long time, you really can't have that, what we're calling the sunk cost bias, because that can bite you in the butt.
Exactly. And I think, real estate, in business, and honestly your life, your relationships, you got to be honest about that, right? Like if you look and you're like, I know I've spent 4 years with this person, but it's super toxic and I don't really want to do it anymore.
Right.
That doesn't mean you got to stay with them.
That's so true. Or like you have something that you think's tying you to that situation. It's like, hey, you've got one life to live. Whether that's as a real estate investor, as a spouse, as you know, a friend or whatever, you have to surround yourself with places and things that you want to be doing in life. Because once it's over, you don't get to pick.
Exactly. What's the old, I think it's like a tech or like a startup saying, what they say, pivot. It's like pivot fast, something faster, or what is it?
I don't know. I know along the lines, I'll give you another analogy, which is at Amazon. They use the two-way door method when they're trying to do things. They always say we make two-way door decisions. If it's a one-way door decision, they don't make them, which meaning meaning you can only go through the door once, meaning once you're in that path, you can't get back out. They like to do these two-way decisions, meaning the door swings both ways. You go in, you test it out. You don't like that room, you go right back out, go to the next one. And you just kind of test and don't get caught up in that sunk cost bias. Be willing to pivot and adapt quickly, because, you know, that's how you fail, if you get stuck on some stinking idea that just doesn't work.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what always gets me too is when I meet a lot of these different entrepreneurs that are like 25 and have this problem. They're right. Like they feel like they've wasted so much time, and I get it. Like I was 25 not that long ago, 7 years ago, and I used to feel the same way. I was like, damn, I'm like getting old. Like I got to figure my life out. But now at 32, I'm like, bro, I got so much freaking time.
I wish I would have failed a couple times in my 20s, honestly. Yeah. Like I think the more you fail, the better, and taking the risk. If I had one regret, which I'm not a regretful person, but if I had one regret, I would have failed more.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's taking more risk because you have nothing to lose. Like when you're 25, you have half a decade that you can screw around and do everything wrong and still have your entire life ahead of you. Totally. Like, honestly. And that's something that people, I think, take for granted to understand because of the schooling system and, the corporate culture, all that sort of stuff. I don't know.
Totally. It's anti that. It's slow and steady wins the race.
Which is not true at all. Because that's the other thing, too, is with, if you learn how to do basic business systems, and this is where I'm going to keep coming back to the massive income over passive income. I did, like, that's going to be the new saying. I still am trying to figure out where I stole that from. Yeah. But, like, I am very, very convinced that if you dial in on a skill, you learn to systematize it, and you learn just like the basic fundamentals of making money, which is like literally just have a service, provide it to people, monetize it. Like, and that can be anything. I am absolutely convinced that 95% of people can replace their W-2s within 1 year. Easily.
Yeah, you're absolutely probably right.
Because like the average person, making up to like low six figures even, absolutely can replace that in 1 year.
Totally.
No questions asked.
Right. Absolutely. I agree.
The exceptions will be like the corporate people that are making like 500 grand a year, stuff like that. Like that will take a little bit longer, but hopefully when you're gotten to that position, you're at least saving some money so that you can accelerate your escape in some other way.
This reminds me of a quote that we heard at this mastermind, which is from Nick Santanatasso. Is that how you say his name?
Something like that. So if you guys don't know who Nick is, he's a very well-known speaker. He tours with Tony Robbins, and he's famous because he was born with a, I guess like a deformity. Like, is that like a PC thing to say? Like, either way, he was born with no legs and only one arm, and basically on his one arm that he has, he doesn't have a hand. He basically has like one finger. Yeah. But he's like, his organs and stuff all work. He's super sharp. He's not like mentally disabled at all. But
yeah, there's 1 in 10 people when he was born into the world. 1 in 10 people like him, and I think like he's the only one that survived, or like only a couple are known to survive. Anyhow, he said this quote, and I'm quoting it: "Time is money is BS." The people that say that probably don't have enough time or money, or have less time or money than you. And then he followed up by saying, "Poor people use their time to make money. Rich people use their money to buy back their time." Yeah, I wrote that down word for word. I just thought it was funny, and at the timing of what you're talking about, which is that traditional mindset of like converting time by showing up to a job or a company, honestly, that you own. That you're trading your time for money. That's that's like dumb. And then so if you're listening to this, my point is like, stop saying time is money, because it shouldn't be. Time is not money. Money should equal time, right? The more money you have, the more time you have. And so if you think that you have to put in time to make money, you're going down the wrong path. That's the wrong mindset to have.
It is. And I mean, I think you do need to do that a little bit to start, right?
You do, but don't think of it that way. Right. Don't think I think you just got to get on the mindset of trading time for money. You have to put in effort, because there's some people that could do what you and I are doing that could probably do it for less effort. Does that mean they need to put the same amount of effort for the same amount of dollars?
Yeah. And I think
not.
that's the key difference is you're trading effort for money, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny. This is actually something that I've been going over with my wife recently. She left her W-2 last August, and she's going through this phase of like starting her art business and all that sort of stuff. But she was telling me the other day, she's like, I still get in this mental rut where I'm like, I need to be at a computer for 8 hours a day.
Right.
And I'm like, why? Like, just have your metrics or like your goals for what you're going to do with your art that you're going to sell, which I mean, she is legitimately selling her art online to like random people that aren't friends and family. So it's working.
Yep.
And it's like, just get your targets, what you need to hit, do that. And then who cares for the rest of it? Like you have hit the effort mark, your money's going to start coming in, that, and let that run. And when you're an entrepreneur, right, sometimes that effort is 14-hour days, right? Sometimes it's 2-hour days, right? It varies a lot. But it is a, important mindset shift to have, but it's very hard when you've been in like a W-2 corporate structure for a long time.
Yeah. Having that freedom is the luxury, I guess.
Yeah.
Is what you're talking about. Which sometimes it's not fun having to work 14-hour days if that's what you have to do.
Exactly.
That's the effort you got to put in.
Well, I mean, that's the trade-off though, right? And the goal is to be able to do that, but have a system and a plan for how you're going to get out of it. And also knowing what your time worth and at what point it makes sense to hire people.
And right when you said that, I was thinking the last part of this statement from Nick was always be willing to cut a check to go faster. And he started this whole conversation with success, rewards, speed. So always be willing to cut a check to go faster. You and I feel like in a lot of, not all things, but we've done that. We've been willing. That's why we hired a business coach, because we knew we could get to where we wanted to go, but we wanted to go much faster because success does reward speed. Yeah. And so when you're talking about the time versus money, all that sort of stuff, time is so much more important than anything in this world. And so if you can pay to get there, why not? And I think there was some other conversation around in school, copying the person next to you is called cheating, but in business, that I don't remember what the analogy was, but like that it's called like mirroring. We call it mirroring, and then you just do what somebody else does and scale it, and that's okay.
Yeah, which is so funny because that's so true.
So
right,
true.
Like you look at almost every business, like even like a lot of the large like tech businesses and stuff that have come up. They look at the one that's getting huge and they just go into the same thing with like a slight change to it. Like, totally. What Bumble went public not too long ago. That was literally Tinder, right? Like the exact same thing, but it said, well, what if the woman has to engage first?
Exactly. Cool. Just a small nuance change with everything. What about Zoom versus all these other Skype versus Microsoft Teams versus all these other things that they've all adapted, and even big companies don't create, they just copy.
They do everything, right?
And in fact, one of the strategies for these big tech companies, which is always in question, is what they do is they will buy these other companies that are trying to do something, and they'll roll them up into their business model so they have no competition. It's part of their monopoly, and then they bundle it with this package called like Microsoft Teams, for example, and then they decimate their competition, which is somewhat unfair, is what people say, I guess, is the point. But they're just copying or they're buying to go faster.
Exactly. And that goes big business, small business, real estate. And that's always a funny thing too when it comes to real estate investors. Everyone is trying to find like the next hot area to buy in. They're trying to get ahead of the curve, path of progress, all that sort of stuff. Just look at where people are already making money and just buy in those areas and do what those people are doing. And everyone says like, oh, well, it's competitive. It's like, it's competitive in those areas because it freaking works.
Right. I mean, look at real estate wholesaling. There's people in every single market, but it still works.
Exactly. And that's one of the biggest things when people, they inquire about the instant investor program or like how to get started, and they just ask things like that, is they say, do you think that my market's too competitive? It's like, I know my friend Jim, he does deals here, and he says it's really hard. I'm like, cool. Right. Well, just don't do exactly what he's doing. Find the stuff that's working for him and just do that better.
Yeah. Or people get worried about like, well, I don't want to give an employee all my trade secrets because what if they take it and run? And start their own thing because they're too good or whatever. It's like, awesome. Now you have a partner in that market. And if you don't treat them like shit, then you guys could probably do deals together.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, abundance mindset, especially when it comes to real estate too, it is hard business to get started, and the community is so small that most people will have an abundance mindset with it. And if they don't, they're not going to be around very long.
They're not going to last maybe a couple years.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, tons of good stuff. Yeah, I enjoyed that chat with Nick though. And that was a cool experience too. Cause I mean, he usually speaks in front of like 10,000 people, and he literally came to our little Airbnb in Scottsdale and chatted with 12 of us, and then just like hung out with us afterwards for a while.
Yeah. It was probably one of the best experiences I've had. And you're right. Like, I think he was talking about being at one of the Tony Robbins events in front of 25,000 people. Mm-hmm. And I'm not familiar with all the Tony Robbins events, but I can't remember what it was he called it, but yeah, that's a ton of people. And then for him to just to show up, and that's also why you hire certain coaches, because he's in our coaches Steve's network, right? And was able to get him to come and speak to 10 people when he normally speaks to 20,000, 10,000, right? That's not easy to do.
And that is something else too to consider when you're looking at coaches, is who's in their network. Because I mean, honestly, paying to be in proximity with other large names that can help you scale or help you grow your business is worth an insane amount of money.
Network equals net worth, the old cliche. And getting just to see, for me in life, the best things that have happened to me is when I've elevated myself by putting myself in the room so that I'm with people that are doing more, and then I'm like, oh, I want to do that now. And then you grow up to be with those people, and then you find another group, right? Not that you're leaving them in the dust, you're just finding new groups to help elevate you.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, anything else to touch on? We didn't touch a lot of business stuff or real estate stuff, but that's okay. Yeah. You guys have heard most of that at this point anyway. So, good. So cool.
I'm good.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for listening today. If you enjoyed the show, you should leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you should also share it with your friends. It is the easiest way for this show to grow, for you to refer it to other people. Send them the link. Tell them, hey, these guys are doing some cool stuff in real estate and business, and you should follow along. I think you get a lot from it. So do it. Share with everybody. Share it with your grandma. These say they're like me, grandma. You know, they're young men. You can listen to what they're doing. That's what I'm trying to do. Get some inspiration that way. I don't know. But we need to expand our demographics somehow. We'll figure it out. So anyways, guys, if you could share with people, that'd be great. Besides that, you should go to collectingkeyspodcast.com/free, and you can get your free 5-step guide to start generating off-market leads. And aside from that, we appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you next week.